Have you ever worked your whole life to be invisible, just so no one could question if you belong? Claire Thompson did everything right. She kept her head down. She worked harder than anyone else. And she never asked for more than a quiet corner to prove herself, until the day her sketch fell in a room full of millionaires and someone saw her for who she truly was. She did not ask for attention, but now all eyes were on her. Some with curiosity, some with judgment, and one with something deeper. Would you risk everything you built to become everything you are? Would you walk into a room where you were never meant to be and stay standing? This is not just a story about love or ambition. It is about what happens when a woman chooses herself, and maybe, in doing so, chooses something greater. Come closer. Her story is waiting. The sky above Cicero still carried the soft gray of early morning when Claire Thompson stepped onto the cool kitchen floor. The silence in her apartment was familiar. It was not empty. It was chosen. She reached for her favorite mug, a chipped one with faded blue flowers, poured hot water over a teaspoon of coffee, watched the steam curl upward. The only sound was the slow hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak from the wooden windowsill. Claire liked mornings like this. No voices, no headlines, no rush. Her apartment sat above an old bookstore on a quiet corner west of Chicago. The windows faced the street below. On some days, she opened them wide. On others, she let the world pass without invitation. Claire was 28, but there was something older in her gaze. Not in age, in knowing. She had soft brown hair that she always pinned back. Her clothes were simple, always neat, always quiet. She wore soft shoes that made no noise when she walked across the floors of power. At 7 She sat briefly at the desk near the window. On it were 3 sketchbooks, stacked in order of wear. A tin box filled with pencils. One corner of the desk still held a faint circle from an old coffee mug her mother used to drink from. She touched the top sketchbook, then pulled her hand back. Some days, she could draw. Other days, it hurt too much. She checked the time, then packed her bag, blazer, tablet, notebooks, one folded scarf, and one old piece of paper, gently tucked between 2 sheets. The street was brisk that morning, the kind of chill that nudged people awake. Claire caught the red line heading downtown. She found a seat near the window and folded her hands in her lap. Outside, Chicago moved like it always did, urgent, ambitious. But Claire noticed the quiet things. A boy holding his lunch bag tightly, a woman helping an older man with his coat, a tired couple who sat in silence, but with their fingers intertwined. She arrived at the office building by 8:15. Grayson and Cole Capital stood tall and sharp, like something carved from glass and steel, the kind of place that echoed when you walked and made you lower your voice. Claire nodded at the security guard, took the elevator to the 41st floor, past polished floors, modern art, and people who smelled of new money and quiet judgment. She did not pause to check her reflection. She never did. Claire had been the executive assistant to Ethan Grayson for nearly 2 years. In that time, she had learned how to anticipate his rhythms, how to speak without saying much, how to be present without being seen. Ethan was not the kind of man who made conversation. He was the kind who measured time in seconds and meetings in millions. At 37, he had already built an empire. Cold, brilliant, precise. That was the word most people used. But Claire saw more. She saw the way he stood near windows longer than necessary. How he sometimes blinked slowly when no one was looking. how he paused before answering questions that touched on anything personal. She never asked about his past. He never asked about hers. Still, there was a rhythm to their work. He trusted her in ways he did not trust others. Let her take notes by hand. Let her speak freely when others had to wait. That morning, Claire reviewed the agenda for a major investor summit. Executives from Tokyo, London, and Frankfurt were flying in. Everything had to be perfect. She had double-checked the files, printed backups, studied the names and faces of every guest. It was her way of staying in control. At 9:02, she entered the boardroom to prepare the space. She adjusted the lighting, placed folders evenly along the table, aligned pens to the edge of each pad. The view from the windows was sharp and endless. The city looked busy and cold from this height. Claire dimmed the glass slightly. The room softened. It was ready. Her phone buzzed with a reminder. 1 hour left. Back in her apartment, hidden inside a drawer, was a small shoebox wrapped in an old piece of quilt. Inside it were drawings, one brush, a faded photograph. 3 people stood in the photo: a woman with a paint-stained apron, a little girl with braids, and a man standing stiffly beside them, squinting at the sun. That girl had become Claire, but only after years of learning how not to be seen. She had never told anyone about that box, not even Ethan. At 10:00, the door opened. Ethan walked in. He wore a navy suit. His hair was smooth, his walk silent. Claire handed him the meeting notes. He gave a small nod, then sat down. The room filled quickly. Discussions began. Numbers flowed across the table. Graphs appeared on the screen. People asked questions with confidence. Claire stood near the wall, ready to adjust or record whatever was needed. She did not feel nervous, but something inside her felt tight, a knowing. 15 minutes into the meeting, Claire reached into her bag for a pen. As she pulled out her tablet, a notebook slipped from the side pocket. It fell to the floor with a soft thud. A folded paper slid out. One of the guests leaned forward to help, but Ethan was faster. He picked it up, unfolded it, then paused. The room went still. It was a pencil sketch, on textured paper. The image showed a child lying on a bare wooden floor, his back curled slightly. In the background, a woman with a tired frame reaching forward. One hand braced on the ground. The lines were not polished, but the pain was clear. Claire froze. Ethan looked at the drawing, then at her. Their eyes met. She could not move, could not speak. He said nothing, and that was the worst part. The drawing rested in Ethan's hands for what felt like far too long. Yet not a second passed on the wall clock. Claire stood still. She could feel the weight of her own breath, shallow and uneven. Her fingers trembled slightly, though they remained tightly clenched behind her. No one else in the room seemed to know what to do. A few eyes flicked toward the sketch, but quickly returned to their tablets. Politeness, or discomfort. Perhaps both. Ethan looked at the paper again, then at Claire, then, as if nothing had happened, he folded it carefully, slipped it back into the notebook, closed it, and placed it on the table in front of him. "We will resume with the Tokyo projection," he said calmly. His voice was smooth, unchanged, as if the drawing had not spoken to something long buried inside him. But Claire felt it. She stood straighter, nodded once, then moved quietly toward the wall screen to adjust the next graph. The rest of the meeting passed without incident. Numbers were exchanged, trends debated, hands shaken. The guests complimented the precision of the team. Claire smiled politely, took notes, but she felt every second like a ticking clock. By 11:40, The room began to empty. Ethan remained seated. Claire stepped forward to collect the folders. As she reached for the one nearest to him, he placed his hand on the notebook. He looked up. "Close the door behind you," he said. Claire paused, nodded, and did as he asked. The door clicked softly. Silence returned. Ethan leaned back in his chair. The sunlight poured in behind him, casting sharp edges on his face. His expression was unreadable, but not cold. "I would like to ask you something," he said slowly. Claire's hands tightened around the folders. He lifted the notebook, gently opened it to the sketch. "Did you draw this?" She nodded once. Her voice felt trapped in her throat. She swallowed hard. "Yes." Ethan studied it again. His eyes moved across the page as if he were reading a letter written in another language, one he had not seen in years. "It is not just a drawing," he said. "It is something you remember." Claire hesitated. "Yes." He closed the notebook and placed it gently on the table, then stood, walked slowly to the window. "I grew up in a house where everything looked perfect," he said. "Marble floors, lush gardens, gold frames around photographs of people who were never home." Claire stayed still. "I had a room with books I never read, toys I never used. It was quiet, too quiet, and that quiet became something I carried." He turned toward her. "You do not just remember pain, you carry it. You build your world around it. That sketch, that child. You did not just draw it. You were inside it." Claire felt something shift in her chest, something she had locked away. She nodded. "It was the day my mother collapsed," she said softly. Ethan did not move. She had not eaten in 2 days. Claire continued. "We were living in a one-bedroom trailer. My father had left again. She tried to get up. I wanted to help, but I was 6. All I could do was draw. The room was quiet." "You do not have to explain," Ethan said. "I want to." She stepped forward, carefully placed the folders on the table. Her eyes did not meet his yet. "That sketch has stayed with me for years. I kept redrawing it, over and over, until the lines stopped shaking." Ethan walked closer. He stopped a few feet away. "Claire, you do not need to hide this part of you." She looked up. "I am not ashamed of where I come from," she said, "but I do not want pity or attention. You are not getting either from me." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan's tone softened. "You are precise, reliable, focused, but today I saw something else. Something real." Claire let out a breath she did not know she was holding. "People like me do not usually fit in places like this," she said. Ethan nodded slowly. "I have built rooms filled with power, but rarely with people who know what pain looks like. And yet, those are the ones I want nearby." The words landed gently, like rain tapping on glass. "I would like you to be at the dinner tomorrow," he said, "with the international partners. You understand the structure of the project better than anyone else here." Claire's eyes widened slightly. "You want me to represent your office? I want you to be yourself. Represent what this company is when we stop pretending." She looked down at the notebook. "Even with this, especially with that." Claire picked up the notebook, held it close to her side. "Okay." Ethan nodded. No smile, but something softened in his gaze. "Thank you for not looking away," Claire said. "I could not," Ethan replied, "and I am not sure I want to." The following morning, Claire woke earlier than usual. The light outside was still pale, and the street below remained mostly silent. But inside her chest, something stirred. She stood by the window for a long moment, mug in hand. The coffee had gone cold, but she had not noticed. Her eyes traced the lines of the fire escape outside, metal against brick, shadow against sky. Her thoughts were elsewhere. Ethan Grayson had looked at her differently yesterday, not with pity, not with confusion, but with a stillness that had unsettled her, as if he had been waiting a long time to see someone be that honest. Claire was not used to being seen. By 8:00 p.m., she was already at her desk. She organized her calendar, reviewed the speaking points for the dinner that night, printed out a fresh agenda. Every task done with precision, every movement calm. But beneath it all, a quiet current ran. At 8:32, the elevator chimed softly. Claire did not need to turn around to know it was him. "Good morning," she said. "Morning," Ethan replied. He placed his coat on the hook near the window, then walked toward her desk, holding something in his hand. "I was not sure you would come in early today," he said. "I always come in early." Claire answered with a small smile. Ethan offered her a sealed envelope. "I wanted to show you something." Claire hesitated, then opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph, a faded one. In it, a young boy sat at a piano, hands resting on the keys. A woman stood behind him, elegant, distant. "My mother used to play for guests," Ethan said, "but never for me." Claire looked up. I remember thinking the piano had more of her attention than I ever did. She studied the photo again, then returned it gently. "Thank you for showing me." Ethan leaned against the edge of the desk. "You draw to forget," he said quietly. "I look to remember." Claire blinked. "Maybe," she said, "but forgetting is not the same as healing." "No, it is not." There was a pause. "You said you drew the same image over and over," Ethan added. Claire nodded. "It changed a little each time. Sometimes I left out the blood. Sometimes I added color. Sometimes I drew the walls closer in, like they were collapsing." Ethan listened, not interrupting. "I wanted to control it," she said, "to turn something messy into lines and shading." "And did it help? Sometimes. Other times, it made me feel smaller." Ethan moved to the window. "When I was 15, I got into a fight with my father," he said, "over something small, probably grades, or manners. I do not remember." Claire watched his reflection in the glass. "He said I was ungrateful, that he had given me everything." I remember saying back, "I did not want everything. I just wanted him." He turned around. That was the first time I realized money did not fix loneliness. Claire lowered her eyes. "I think I knew that earlier than most." They stood in silence for a moment. It was not heavy, just full. Then Ethan spoke again. "Tonight, I will be sitting with people who wear smiles like armor. They will ask about growth and projections. They will praise me, then look for cracks." He looked at her. "I want you there, not as my assistant, as someone who does not need to pretend." Claire felt her throat tighten. "I am not sure I know how to be anything else in that room. You already are." She folded her hands together. "I have not been to a formal dinner in years," she said. "Not one that was not part of work. Neither have I." Ethan replied. Claire laughed softly. "I will do my best. That is all I ever ask." He paused. "One more thing." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a thin box. Claire raised an eyebrow. "It is not jewelry," he said. "I promise." She opened it. Inside was a single fountain pen. Simple, elegant, lightweight. "I noticed you write with a pencil," he said. "This is for when you are ready to keep something permanent." Claire stared at the pen for a long moment, then closed the box carefully. I do not know what to say. You do not have to. He nodded once, then walked away. Claire stood there, holding the box. For years, she had erased parts of her story, smudged them with silence, redrew them in ways that made them easier to carry. But this morning, she felt something different. Not freedom, but maybe the beginning of it. The restaurant sat quietly along the edge of North Clark Street, tucked between a flower shop and an antique bookstore. It looked almost like it did not want to be found. Inside, the light was warm, not bright, not dim, just enough to make everything feel closer. Ethan had arrived before Claire. He sat at a small table by the window, no tie, just a dark gray jacket over a crisp white shirt. His phone face down, his hands folded loosely in his lap. When Claire walked in, the host gave a soft nod and led her across the room. She wore a navy blue dress, modest, graceful. Her hair was pinned loosely. A few strands fell gently near her cheek. She had not worn perfume, but the cold air outside had left a faint scent of rain on her coat. Ethan stood when he saw her. "You look calm," he said. Claire smiled. "That is the best I could manage." They sat. A moment passed without words, but it was not awkward, just careful. "I do not do this often," Ethan said. "Dinner?" "No. Dinner without expectations." Claire tilted her head slightly. "Why now?" He looked at her. Not past her. At her, because yesterday, something fell on the floor, and everything I thought I knew shifted. Claire folded her hands gently on the table. "I almost walked out," she said. "When that drawing landed between us, I felt like a window had opened without my permission. But you stayed. I stayed. The waiter came by, asked quietly if they were ready." Ethan nodded. He had ordered in advance. Nothing heavy. Simple food. A bottle of wine he knew paired well with small bites and long silences. When the waiter left, Claire glanced out the window. The street was quiet. Only a few people walked by. "I do not like loud places," she said. "Too many things pulling your attention." Ethan nodded. "Same." They sipped their drinks in silence for a moment. Then Claire asked, "Did you ever draw?" Ethan shook his head. "I was not allowed to be messy." Claire looked down at her napkin. "I was only allowed to be messy." No one noticed either way. The first course arrived. Light greens. A touch of citrus. Neither of them spoke as they ate, but the silence was full of something shared. Ethan broke it first. "When I was in college, I met a professor who once said that the greatest form of art is not what you create, but what you choose to let others see." Claire raised an eyebrow. "And what do you let people see?" He took a sip of water. "The part of me that is finished, polished, profitable." "Is that who you are?" "No." She waited. "But it is the part they will not question." Claire leaned back in her seat. "Then why invite me here? I am not finished. I am not polished. Because you are honest." Ethan paused. "And because when I watched you work for the past 2 years, I saw someone holding herself together in ways no one else noticed." The second course came. Warm, soft bread, a bowl of soup that smelled like home. Claire smiled. "You surprise me. I get that, a lot less than you might think." She looked at him. "You have spent years building a world that looks untouchable. That is because it was until someone dropped a drawing on my boardroom floor." Claire laughed. A soft, real laugh, the kind that starts in the throat and settles in the chest. "I did not mean to," she said. "I know." After a moment, Ethan asked, Are you afraid of being seen? Claire thought for a while. Yes, but not in the way most people think. He listened. I am not afraid of being looked at. I'm afraid of being misunderstood, of someone seeing the pieces and thinking they are the whole. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that, more than I wish I did. The final course came. A small dessert, chocolate layered with something dark and smooth, the kind of sweetness that lingers. Claire ate slowly, savoring. I have not had a meal like this in a long time, she said. What kind of meal, one where I do not have to pretend? Ethan leaned back in his chair. I hope this is not the last. Claire met his eyes. That depends on what happens after this. He looked curious. After what? After I go back to being your assistant? After people ask questions? After the silence between us becomes something others want to fill? Ethan thought carefully. We do not owe anyone an answer, no, but we owe ourselves honesty. He smiled. Then let me be honest. Claire waited. I did not ask you here for strategy, or planning, or even because you impressed me yesterday. I asked you here because I wanted to sit across from someone who does not wear a mask, and who somehow makes me want to take off mine. Claire felt her chest tighten. She looked down at the candle flickering between them, then back at him. Okay, that was all she said, but it was enough. The Monday after the dinner, the energy inside Grayson and Cole felt different, not louder, just more watchful, more aware. Claire felt it before anyone said a word. In the elevator, two analysts stood behind her. They spoke in low tones. Their voices dipped even lower when they realized she was there. One offered a polite nod. The other pretended not to see her. Claire said nothing. She stepped out when the doors opened onto the 41st floor. The hallway lights felt colder than usual. The receptionist greeted her, but the smile did not reach her eyes. Claire walked to her desk, her steps steady, her shoulders square, but something inside her had shifted. By mid-morning, it became clearer. One of the junior associates stopped by with a folder. Before handing it over, she paused and smiled. So, dinner with the boss, she said, voice light and teasing. Claire kept her tone calm. It was business. The girl nodded. Her smile sharpened. Of course, everyone knows how much Mr. Grayson values his team. Then she turned and walked away. That was how it started, not with accusation, but with tone, with suggestion. By the next day, it was no longer just glances. It was conversations that ended when she entered the room. It was laughter that faded too quickly. It was distance. In the cafe, she sat alone with her lunch. 3 people stood up quietly and took their trays elsewhere. Claire kept her eyes on her food. She was not hurt, but she was tired. By Wednesday, she started coming in earlier. She skipped the break room. She brought her own tea in a thermos and drank it at her desk. She kept her work sharp. She made no mistakes, but she spoke less, even to Ethan. He noticed. On Friday afternoon, he called her into his office. The sun was low. The windows painted the floor in gold and blue. Claire stood near the door, waiting. You have been quiet, he said. I am always quiet, she answered. Quieter than usual. Claire looked at him. They are talking, she said softly. Ethan leaned back in his chair. I thought they might. Claire stepped forward. Her voice was steady, not angry, not fragile. I do not mind people noticing, but I do mind what they choose to believe. You should not have to carry that. But I am... The room fell into silence. Ethan sat up straighter. I did not think about the weight of it. That is on me. Claire nodded slowly. That is because You do not get whispered about. You make the rules. I should have protected you. I did not ask you to. She paused. But now I need clarity. Ethan folded his hands. What kind of clarity? Claire looked out the window, then back at him. I need to know where I stand. Not just at this desk, but with you. He stood, walked around the desk, stopped a few feet from her. You are someone I trust, someone I respect, and yes, someone I care about. Claire met his eyes. I believe you. She took a slow breath. But it does not change what people say, what they assume. I can address it, he said. How? I can make your title official, your role more defined. Which role? She asked. His silence said enough. Claire stepped back. That is what I thought. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. I need to be able to walk into a room without feeling like I do not belong. You should not have to choose. But I do. There was a knock on the door. The assistant from legal stepped in, holding a folder. She smiled at Claire, then placed the file on the desk. Claire turned to leave. Ethan called to her. Claire. She paused. We will figure this out. Claire gave a slight nod. I hope so. She left the office without another word. That evening, she did not go straight home. Instead, she walked through Lincoln Park. The wind was colder than she expected. It bit at her cheeks. She pulled her coat tighter, but she kept walking. She passed runners, dog walkers, couples holding hands, all moving, all wrapped in their own warmth. Claire found an empty bench, sat down. The lake shimmered in the distance, dark and wide. She watched the sky change color. Pink, then gray, then a deeper blue. She closed her eyes for a moment. Let the quiet find her again. She remembered something her mother used to say. People will talk no matter what, so make sure what they say does not change who you are. Claire opened her eyes. She was tired of being misunderstood, tired of holding herself smaller to fit inside someone else's story. That night, she took out her sketchbook, and for the first time in weeks, she drew, not pain, not silence, not memory. She drew a woman standing in the wind, her face calm, her back straight, and behind her, the world kept moving. The following week passed quietly. Claire kept her focus on her work. She answered emails, she organized documents, she attended meetings, and took notes with the same quiet efficiency as always. But something inside her had hardened. Not bitterness, not anger, just caution. The whispers had not faded. They had only softened, spread thinner. Now, it was not just the staff, clients, vendors, even the cleaning crew watched her longer than they used to. Claire said nothing. She let the stories live where they chose to live, but at night, she drew. She filled page after page with images, some sharp and detailed, some blurred and unfinished. One evening, as she cleaned her desk to leave, she found a small envelope resting beneath her keyboard. There was no name on the front, no initials, just soft cream paper and a gold seal. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. It said, "Sometimes you do not have to say everything to be understood. Meet me tonight. No pressure, just a walk. 70 p.m. outside the building." Claire folded the paper slowly. She held it in her hands for a moment, then tucked it into her coat. At exactly €7, she stepped outside. The city lights had just begun to glow. A soft breeze moved through the streets. She saw him standing across from the entrance, one hand in his pocket. Ethan looked different, not in appearance, but in presence. Softer. less guarded. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost didn't," Claire replied. "I know." He began walking, and she followed. They turned onto a quieter street, where the buildings gave way to trees and long shadows. "I brought something," he said after a while. He reached into his coat and pulled out a rectangular box, dark wood, carefully crafted. He handed it to her. Claire looked at it, unsure. "What is this?" "Just open it." She lifted the lid. Inside was a watercolor set, old, worn, but carefully restored. The metal edges shone in the streetlight. Each color pan had been cleaned and replaced. The brushes looked familiar. Claire's breath caught. "This looks like it is." She ran her finger along the edge. "This is the same set my mother used to have." "I know." Claire looked up, startled. "How you mentioned it, months ago, during a late night at the office. You were tired. You said something about the smell of turpentine and the weight of real brushes. I remembered." Claire stared at him, speechless. "I found a collector. Took a while, but it was worth it." She closed the box gently. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything." They kept walking. After a few steps, Claire stopped. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, not suspicious, just unsure. Ethan turned to face her. "Because you have spent your whole life giving parts of yourself to the world and asking nothing in return." He paused. "Because people like you deserve to be seen without having to fight for it." Claire looked down at the box in her hands. "This feels like too much." "No, it is just enough." She held the box closer to her chest. "This is not a thank you," Ethan said. "It is not an apology either." "Then what is it?" "A reminder that the parts of you you think you have to hide are the ones that brought you here." Claire blinked slowly, then looked away. "I am still not sure where here is." Ethan nodded. "Me neither." They stood in silence. The world moved around them. Cars passed. Leaves rustled. Someone laughed in the distance. Then Claire spoke. "My mother used to say that some gifts are not meant to be used, just kept as proof that someone once thought of you." Ethan smiled gently. "Then keep it however you like. Frame it, store it, paint with it. It is yours." Claire looked up. "Thank you." He nodded. "Walk you home." She hesitated, then nodded. They walked without speaking for a while. Their steps matched in rhythm, neither too fast, neither too close. When they reached her building, Claire turned to him. "I do not know what happens next. You do not have to." Ethan said, "Sometimes you just take the next step. Then the next." Claire opened her door. She looked at the box once more. "Good night," she said. "Good night, Claire." He watched her go inside, then turned and walked away. Inside her apartment, Claire placed the watercolor set on her desk. She turned on the small desk lamp, then pulled out her sketchbook. She did not know what to draw, but for the first time in a long while, she did not feel afraid to begin. The message arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. Claire had just finished her second coffee. The office was still waking up. She opened her inbox, as she always did. Meeting notes, project updates, internal memos. Then, one email made her hands freeze. It was from a place called Riverwood Recovery Center. The subject line read, "Update regarding patient Thomas Thompson." She stared at the name. She had not seen it in years. Not on paper, not out loud, not even in her thoughts, unless they came in shadows. She opened the email slowly. Her father had been admitted 2 days earlier. He was stable. He had given her name as his emergency contact. He had asked to see her. Claire read the email again and again, as if the meaning might change. It did not. She sat back in her chair. The room around her blurred. The soft hum of the office faded into the background. She stood quietly, walked to the restroom, locked the door. She did not cry. She only breathed harder than usual. The mirror reflected a version of her she did not recognize. Tense, pale, a little girl, wrapped in the face of a grown woman. She splashed water on her face, pressed her palms against the sink, and whispered, "Stay steady." That afternoon, she told no one. She answered emails, filed reports, smiled when needed, but her mind wandered back, again and again. That night, she sat by her window, the email still open on her phone, her fingers hovering above the reply button. But she did not type anything. Instead, she stared out into the street. The wind moved through the trees, and her memories moved through her. Thomas Thompson, a man with a soft voice and hard hands, a man who smelled of gasoline and liquor, a man who disappeared for days and returned with promises, and left again, every time. He had vanished after her mother died. She had been 18. She had buried one parent and walked away from the other. Now he was asking to be seen. The next morning, Claire arrived at the office early, but Ethan noticed something different. They were alone in the boardroom. He watched her as she arranged documents. Then he said, "You seem far away." Claire looked up. Her voice was calm, but thin. "I received an email yesterday." He waited. "My father is in rehab. He wants to see me." Ethan said nothing. He only nodded. "I have not seen him since the funeral." She paused. "He showed up drunk. I asked him to leave. He did." There was a quiet beat between them. Ethan spoke softly. "Do you want to go?" Claire shook her head, slowly. "I do not know." She stepped back from the table, looked out the window. For a long time, I imagined what I would say if I ever saw him again. Now I cannot think of a single word. Ethan stepped closer. "You do not have to decide today." Claire looked at him, her expression steady. "I already have." That evening, she took the train to the edge of the city. The Riverwood Recovery Center stood behind a row of oak trees. It looked peaceful, too peaceful. She signed in. A nurse led her down a clean hallway. The air smelled like bleach and old paper. They stopped outside a door. "He is awake," the nurse said gently. Claire nodded. She stepped inside. The man in the bed looked older, smaller. His hair was thinner, his eyes sunken, but she knew that face. He looked up. "Claire." She said nothing. He sat up a little. "I did not think you would come." Still, she said nothing. "I wanted to say I am sorry." Her hands stayed at her sides. "I am not here for apologies," she said. He nodded. "I figured." They sat in silence for a moment. Then he tried again. "I remember you standing in the doorway. You were wearing a blue dress. You asked me why I left, and I had no answer." Claire looked at the window. The trees moved slowly outside. "You had years to give me one," she said. "I know." She stood up. "I came to see your face. That is all." He nodded again. "Thank you." She walked to the door. Her hand paused on the handle. "My mother forgave you. I do not know if I can." He looked at her, eyes tired. "I do not expect you to." She opened the door, then turned once more. "Do not ask for anything else. Not yet." "I will not." She left the room without looking back. Outside, the wind felt sharp against her cheeks, but she kept walking. Back through the hallway, past the front desk, out into the world she had rebuilt without him. That night, there was a knock on her door. It was Ethan, Claire opened it slowly. "I thought you might come," she said. "I was not sure I should." They sat in her small living room. The lights were low. The tea was warm. The silence was kind. Claire told him everything. She did not pause. She did not filter. And he listened. Not as a CEO, not as someone trying to fix things, just as someone who cared. When she finished, he said, "You were brave to go." Claire looked at him. "I did not feel brave. You do not have to feel it. You just have to do it." She smiled faintly. "I think that was the hardest thing I have ever done." Ethan nodded. "And you did it anyway." The weekend came with unexpected stillness. The air outside was cool. Soft gray clouds moved above the city. Claire stayed home. She cleaned, cooked, read a little. But mostly, she thought, not about her father, not about the past. She thought about Ethan, about the quiet way he had listened, about the warmth in his eyes when she had spoken, about the silence that followed not out of awkwardness, but out of respect. On Sunday afternoon, she received a message from him. It was short, simple. "Walk with me. For River, the lake." She did not reply, but she went. The path along the lake was mostly empty. Ethan waited near a bench, hands in his coat pockets. When he saw her, he smiled softly. No rush, no expectation. They began to walk without saying a word. The water was calm. Boats sat motionless in the distance. Birds skimmed the surface, then disappeared again. After a while, Ethan spoke. "I have been thinking." Claire kept her eyes ahead. "So have I." He glanced at her. "I have spent years building things, companies, plans, systems. But the truth is, I do not know how to build what matters most." Claire slowed her pace. "What is that connection?" She looked at him. "You are more connected than most." "Not really," he said. "I know how to manage people. I know how to lead, but I have never learned how to stay when it is uncomfortable. How to be known without pulling away." Claire stopped walking. "And what do you want to be known for?" Ethan turned toward her. "For who I am when I am not performing." Claire's eyes searched his. "And who is that?" He paused. "Someone who is afraid of being loved for the wrong reasons. Someone who wants something real, but does not know how to ask for it." Claire looked down. "You do not have to ask with words." He took a breath. "Then let me try this way." He stepped closer. Not too close, just enough for her to feel the honesty in his voice. "Claire, I did not fall for your work. I did not fall because of what you carry. I fell when I saw you still show up every day, even when it was hard. I saw you, and I have not looked away since." Claire's heart beat faster, but her voice stayed calm. "I cannot be someone's project. You are not. I cannot fix what is broken in you. You are not here to fix anything, just to be—" She turned slightly. "This is a risk." "I know. If people find out, let them—" Claire blinked. "You are willing to lose control." "For the first time, yes." She stepped back. "I need time. I can wait." They stood facing each other, the wind pressing gently against their coats. "I want to trust you," Claire said. "Then let me earn it." She nodded. "I will not promise anything. I am not asking for promises, only a chance." Claire took a deep breath. "Then we begin here." They started walking again, side by side, not holding hands, not needing to. The next morning, Claire returned to the office with steady steps. She greeted people politely. She answered questions. She went about her day. But something was different. She was no longer trying to be invisible. By late afternoon, Ethan called her into his office, not for a meeting, just to check in. She sat across from him. He poured her tea. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Ethan asked, "How are you feeling? Tired? Lighter?" He nodded. "You were honest yesterday. That means everything to me." Claire looked at him carefully. "You were honest too. That is what scared me most." Ethan leaned forward. "I know we are stepping into uncertain space, but I do not want to miss this. Whatever it becomes." Claire smiled faintly. "Neither do I." She stood. "I should get back to work." He nodded. As she reached the door, he said, "Claire." She turned. "I saw you long before the drawing ever fell." But that was the day I finally allowed myself to admit it. Claire's eyes softened. "Then I am glad it happened." She left the room with quiet strength. Outside the office window, the sun dipped behind the buildings. The city kept moving. But for a moment, time stood still. 2 weeks later, Claire received an invitation she did not expect. Grayson & Cole was hosting its annual leadership gala, an exclusive event, elegant suits, long gowns, champagne that cost more than rent. Each year, only executives and board members attended. Until now, the envelope was hand-delivered, gold script across heavy white cardstock. Inside was her name, not as staff, but as a featured guest. No title, no position, just the name of Claire Thompson. She stared at it for a long time. Later that afternoon, she stepped into the office of Ethan. The door closed behind her with a quiet click. "You sent me this," she said, holding the envelope. The eyes of Ethan looked up from his desk. "I did." "Why?" "Because you belong in that room." Claire remained silent. "You created the foundation for one of our most successful projects. You handled pressure with more grace than people twice your age, and you made this company better." She placed the card on the edge of his desk. "And what will they think?" The voice of Ethan did not hesitate. "They already think what they want. Let them." Claire gave him a long look, then left the room. That evening, she called Helena Martinez, a designer, a friend, one of the few people who had known Claire before she became quiet. "Can you help me find something that feels like me?" The voice of Helena was kind through the phone. "Of course. We are not going for perfect. We are going for real." 3 days later, Claire stood in front of her mirror, a soft gray dress, simple, structured, elegant without trying, her hair tucked back gently. A silver bracelet once worn by her mother, she felt ready. Not to impress, not to prove, just to walk in with her spine straight and her eyes open. The gala took place at a rooftop ballroom overlooking the river. Glass walls, golden light. A string quartet played something soft and steady. Claire arrived alone. She stepped out of the elevator and let herself breathe. Eyes turned as she walked in, some familiar, some skeptical, some surprised. She nodded politely, moved with quiet confidence. At the center of the room stood Ethan. He wore a black suit, no tie. The eyes of Ethan lit up when they saw her. He walked to her slowly, stopped just in front of her. "You are here. You invited me. I was not sure you would come. Neither was I." They stood for a moment. Then she said, "I am going to walk around first." "Of course." He stepped aside. Let her move through the room. She spoke with a few partners, answered questions about the Harmony Heights project. She was direct, calm, collected. Then she found herself near a group of executives. One of them, an older man in finance, smiled too tightly. "So, You are the Claire, he said. I am. Interesting path you have taken. I would call it honest. He chuckled. Some might say strategic. The gaze of Claire did not waver, and some confuse authenticity with ambition. A woman in the circle added softly, I have seen your work. It speaks louder than gossip. Claire nodded in thanks, then excused herself. Later that night, she found Ethan on the terrace. The lights of the city shimmered behind him. You stood tall in there, he said. I was not sure I could, until I did. He looked at her carefully. I want you to stay at this company, but I also want more for you. More how you have your own voice, your own vision. It is time to shape something that carries your name. Claire paused. I have been thinking the same thing. A small smile formed on the face of Ethan. You already have a list of clients asking for you. What are you waiting for? She looked down at the city. To give myself permission? Then take it. She turned to him. This does not mean I am leaving you. He shook his head. I know. It just means you are becoming fully yourself. And that has to come first. Exactly. They stood close, but not holding on. There was no need. Claire looked at him. I never thought this was the life I would have. And now I cannot imagine settling for anything less. He reached for the hand of Claire, not to pull, just to connect. She let him, not because she needed support, but because she chose it. And that made all the difference. 3 months later, everything looked the same. The same office tower, the same skyline, the same coffee shop Claire passed every morning. But inside, everything had changed. Claire no longer walked with her head down. She no longer avoided eye contact in the elevator. She no longer apologized for being seen. Her business had grown quietly, but steadily. She still collaborated with Grayson and Cole on selective projects. But she now led her own design studio on the top floor of a renovated brick building in River North. It was small, bright, filled with plants and light, and it carried her name, Claire Thompson Design Studio. The first time she saw the letters on the glass door, she felt her throat tighten, not from pride, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that her story was no longer a secret. It had become a foundation. Her first independent project was a nonprofit youth center on the South Side, a space filled with art, color, and warmth. Designed for kids who had stories like hers, stories with missing fathers, mothers who worked 2 jobs, dreams held together by courage. Ethan came to the ribbon cutting. He stood in the back, said nothing, just watched. Afterward, he walked beside her through the open rooms. You made this feel like hope, he said. Claire looked at the wall near the front entrance. Painted in soft gray was a quote. Beauty is not in what you buy. It is in what you choose to keep. She touched the edge of the wall lightly. My mother said that once, she whispered. They stood there in silence. Later that evening, they sat on the rooftop of her building. The city below glowed in warm amber. 2 mugs of tea between them, no champagne, no noise. Claire turned toward him. I did not expect this. To feel free and still connected. Ethan nodded slowly. I used to believe I had to choose between power and peace. You made me see they are not opposites. Claire smiled. And I used to think being strong meant walking alone. You are not alone. Neither are you. They looked out at the skyline, the same city that had once made them feel small. Now it looked different, not because the city had changed, but because they had. Ethan reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to her, Claire opened it. It was the original pencil sketch, the one that had fallen in the boardroom all those months ago. "You kept this," she said. "I did. Why? Because that was the moment I saw you. Not as my assistant, not as a colleague, but as a person I wanted to know, and protect, and grow beside." She held the paper in her hands. The corners were worn, the lines still clear. "I almost erased this. I thought it would make people see me as broken. But it made you visible." Claire folded the sketch gently and placed it in her bag. They sat in quiet again. Then Ethan spoke. "Do you believe in forever?" Claire tilted her head. "I believe in the effort to build it." He looked at her. "Would you want to build it with me?" She turned toward him fully. "I do not need promises. I do not need timelines. Then what do you need? Respect, truth, and space to grow. You will have that." She reached for his hand, held it firmly, not as someone who needed saving, but as someone who had saved herself. The stars above flickered faintly. The wind moved through the rooftop garden, and below them, the city pulsed with life. They did not speak again that night. They did not have to, because sometimes love is not about the things we say. It is about what we build quietly, brick by brick, moment by moment, when no one else is watching. Sometimes, the hardest journey is not about changing where we live or what we do. It is about allowing ourselves to be seen, fully, quietly. And truthfully, Claire Thompson did not chase wealth. She did not seek power. She only wanted to do good work and live with dignity. But when life placed her in a spotlight she never asked for, she had to choose, stay silent, or speak for who she truly was. Her story reminds us that being visible takes courage, especially when the world tells us to stay small. It teaches us that healing does not always mean forgiving the past. Sometimes, it means choosing not to carry it alone anymore. Most of all, Claire shows us this. We are never too late, never too old, never too quiet to begin again, to build something meaningful, to be respected, and to be loved, not for what we offer, but for who we are. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched something in your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that speak to the quiet places inside us. Your support means more than words can say. We are so glad you are here.